Don't you agree? We have to overcome. We must overcome. We must overcome the threat of the plutocrats who would have us all be homeless. They would think that it's the right thing for the effluvia to roll down the street because they consider sewers and public libraries socialism. They consider vaccinations socialism. They consider anybody having anything but their small billionaire club is too much. I decided to just call my little talk the bell tolls for you. Remember Ernest Hemingway's For Whom the Bell Tolls? Well, the bell is tolling for each and every one of us. We can no longer be narcissistic, navel-gazing Americans. We must overcome the conditioning of our conglomerated media, our petty racial hierarchies, our class obsessions, our sexism, our homophobia, our penchant for hating people for different religions. The bell tolls for you. The bell tolls for me. We are here in New York, not far from Wall Street. Just around the corner there's the courthouse, and there's a jail, and the jail is full of people that look like me, and some like you. We think about this Wall Street that has brought us this devastation globally, and we forget sometimes, what was the first stop on Wall Street? Africans, black people, supposedly called slaves. I don't like that term. Enslaved people. That is the basis of the world that we know that must change. The bell tolls for you and I to want a different world. Cindy Sheehan said it, and I agree with her. I'm thinking about, I haven't spoken with Cindy Sheehan via email, but my father was one of the first responders to the Pentagon on September 11th, 2001. He died 9 years and 363 days to the 10th anniversary after having a series of very freaky cancers. I can recall on 9/11 when my mother called and said, your father's at the Pentagon saying, God, let the damn thing burn. Dad, what are you doing there? Oh God, Daddy, please don't be there. But he was there pulling people out, sick, and we wonder, was it really a plane? What made his gallbladder form into something that looked like pumpernickel bread, that the doctors couldn't even figure out how to get his gallbladder out? So they had to cut it out in teeny tiny layers. And then when they got that cancer, there was another cancer, then there was another cancer. They couldn't even figure out what's going on. And so when I think about the loss of Mrs. Sheehan's son on April 9th, several years ago, and I think about my father passing on September 9th, so many of us, the bell tolls for us to get justice. The bell tolls for us to get true freedom. The bell tolls for us to get rid of this unsustainable capitalistic system that oppresses us. The bell tolls for us to say no war in Iran, no war in Syria, no war in Mali, no war anywhere else. The war is to allow the people of the world to be free to enjoy the wealth of this planet equally. The bell tolls for you and I. The bell is tolling. Will you be counted? The Occupy movement, we knew, people look like me, would not succeed, even if they wanted to, because they didn't really feel it enough to want to include everybody. The bell hadn't tolled. We have an opportunity to redeem this society, to redeem ourselves, to establish a new virtue of love, compassion, and unity if we hear the bell calling us. So many of us have allowed divisions by custom. I think about the neighbor that I had who always would look but would never speak, and one day I befriended him and he came home with me and I had to change clothes, and I noticed he was staring. What is he staring at? And he asked me, and he said, you don't have a tail, do you? He says, no, I don't have a tail. My father doesn't have a tail. My mother doesn't have a tail. My grandfather doesn't have a tail. And you know what this young boy named Glenn said? I thought you never had a tail. I said, who told you that I had a tail? He says, my parents. They keep saying this over and over and over again. And I keep saying, I don't see anything. It doesn't look like it, so I just wanted to ask somebody who was black, is this true? What was interesting in this little boy was that he, unlike many of us, latched on to the truth that these people are just like us and he has no tail. And when Glenn went home, he turned his Appalachian family out. He laid them out because we're supposed to be good church-going folks, and you've taught me all these lies about our neighbors, and it's not even true. It got to the point where Glenn's sister came to my house and said, you ruined our family. You ruined our family. I said, how? And she just kept screaming, you ruined their family, and they moved. They moved because they didn't want their son's eyes to be open. Prejudice often is passed to us through family, culture, religion, and we cling to it. We don't hear the bell of sanity. We don't hear the bell of unity. We don't hear the bell of peace. We don't hear the bell that commonly we must come together. Believe it or not, the people in Europe had their doubts about we Americans being able to come together because of our long, historic legacy of bigotry and separation. And it's interesting because we didn't start out this way. How many of you are familiar with Bacon's Rebellion of 1676, 100 years before the American Revolution? Black and white, red and brown and mixed came together and said, out with the plutocrats, out! And they had to come up with a recipe to divide the people who had heard the bells of freedom. And they came up with racism. And we all have degrees of prejudice and hierarchical and biological prejudices that cause us to not come together when we need to. If the majority of American people hated police brutality and hated the prison industrial complex and hated the cocaine importing agency called the CIA, we could stop the madness in this country. But are we hearing the bells? There's a hierarchy, I call them blacknecks. African Americans who have turned their backs on our struggle. Condoleezza Rice is one. I can simply give you a quick anecdote. I had the opportunity when I was working as a waiter for a contract catering company to hear Condoleezza Rice say that Hurricane Katrina had no real major impact on the black community. September 8, 2005. Yes, she did. And she said it to Armstrong Williams and Jody Giles, a black politician from Texas. With Negroes like that, the Klan looks real good. We have a hierarchy where you have people like Boy Gillis, I don't call him Ben, and Kwesi, You Fool Me, a gentleman where they took millions of dollars to allow the Bush team to steal the White House. That was done by African Americans who turned their backs on their own people and everyone else for money. So the African American community, they need to repent and they need to reform the same way the white community and the Latino community. We need to purge ourselves of our contradictions because we all are, to some degree, full of these contradictions through the conditioning of this horrible media system. Imagine that, and I'm saying that to you as, when you talk about the Civil War, one of my great-great-grandfathers ran against Abraham Lincoln, John C. Breckinridge, and lost. He was a pro-slavery Democrat. Leave that two-party system alone. Take it from me. The bell tolls for you to tweet, to email, to write, to use whatever means you have, as Adam Clayton Powell used to give in his speech and say, what's in your hands? We have sufficient energy, knowledge, know-how, and power in this room to flip the world on its head. Will you do it?
Yeah!
Will you do it?
Yeah!
Will you do it? It's silent on this side. I don't hear you. Everybody get up and say, yes, we're going to do it. We're going to fight. We're going to fight. The bell calls for you. Fight. God bless you. We must overcome. We must overcome the threat of the plutocrats who would have us all be homeless. They would think that it's the right thing for the effluvia to roll down the street because they can.
Okay.
I do believe we must overcome someday. Don't you agree? We have to consider sewers and public libraries socialism. They consider vaccinations socialism. They consider anybody having anything but their small billionaire club is too much. I decided to just call my little talk the bell tolls for you. Remember Ernest Hemingway's For Whom the Bell Tolls? Well, the bell is tolling for each and every one of us. We can no longer be narcissists. We shall overcome someday. November 6th. Oh,